to talk to you a little bit about disruption. So I was looking around at images on the web for stuff that's about disruption, and I found this in an image search. It's part of a person's actual presentation. This was somebody else's slide. It's deliberately invoking the phrase, aut nekar, aut nekare. Either kill or be killed. I feel like this is a bit of a common attitude in technology today. It's a bit scary. In tech today, disruption usually means destruction. It's taking technology into other industries and taking over. For example, Airbnb. It makes it much harder for people to rent. Uber discourages people from public transport and puts more cars back on the road. We should take care to use the terminology that we're using, the words that we're using around these things like disruption, because of the goals that they represent and the effects that using those words actually has on the work that we do. It's far too easy to dress something up with jargon and euphemistic terms. Here's an example of another one. You can't read a piece on Medium without tripping over the term engagement. What does it actually mean? What are we trying to achieve with engagement? Are we trying to get views? Are we trying to get clicks? Are we trying to get interactions? Are we trying to get prolonged use? Engagement that doesn't serve a user's agenda is just addiction. And their addiction makes us money. And so it's no wonder that a book like this is so incredibly successful, because I'm not exaggerating. We live in a world where this book exists, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, and was voted one of the best business books of the year by Goodreads readers. And you think, okay, this is interesting. The guy who wrote this book has just come out with another one. You won't believe it. Indistractable. How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. Quoted as being the best guide for reclaiming our attention from those who got us hooked in the first place. I mean, Silicon Valley is pretty great, isn't it? Getting paid for creating a problem, and then we pay them again to create the solution. They say admitting you have a problem is the first step to recovery. And so, dear tech industry, we have many, many problems. And I'm going to talk about a few of them today. A few little patterns, if you will. Things that are representative of problems that we have in the industry. The kind of patterns, like the words, we use so frequently without really stopping to consider why we use them. So, I'm the author of a book about accessibility, so I should probably start with accessibility. In case you don't know what I mean when I say accessibility, I'm talking about accessibility being the degree to which technology is usable by as many people as possible, especially disabled people, who are too easily excluded by the technology that we build. So pattern one, it's a really simple one. Low contrast text. Text whose contrast is too low against the background color, just like this slide. That's a more readable contrast now. And so a few months ago, an organization called WebAIM analyzed the top 1 million web pages for automated accessibility errors. And of all the issues they found on these 1 million sites, low contrast text was the most prevalent. And it's because it has perhaps a surprisingly big impact. It affects people with eyesight loss and impaired vision, colorblind people, people using screens with low resolution, people using devices in bright light or spaces. Here is the classic example I always give of low contrast text, because Apple will never fail me on this. Footers and secondary text. This is the Apple footer. We tend to use color contrast to add information hierarchy, don't we? As designers, it's a common choice to lighten the text that we consider less important, to help people focus on the text we consider to be more important. The thing is, if it becomes so low contrast that it's hard for people to read, your decision about what content is important has an even greater impact. This is from LinkedIn Learning, and this tiny low contrast bit of text includes a bit of privacy information that says, these cookies enable us and third parties to track your internet navigation behavior on our website and potentially off of our website. So summing up, low contrast text is popular. It's pretty bad for inclusivity and accessibility, but it isn't usually done maliciously. Once you know about it, very easy to change. So lucky for us all, easy to fix. So I say that low contrast text is easily avoidable. We can still use contrast and color to distinguish hierarchy. We just need to do so within a spectrum of readable text content. So Stephanie Walter has a really great article on her blog with guidelines and tools on how to create an accessible and contrasted color palette. I'll share a link to my slides at the end, so don't worry about having to rapidly write these down. And Jerry Cody's book, Color Accessibility Workflows, also covers the use of accessibility and color and contrast in a huge amount of depth. It's really great. So I'm rating all of these patterns, and the overall rating I'm going to give low contrast text is sad, pensive face. So I think I earlier mentioned about the pattern being inclusive and accessible, and I think that it's probably a good point at which for me to explain the difference between what is inclusive and what is accessible. So accessibility could be described as you have a shop, and the shop is set up away from the street. And so you decide to put some steps on that shop so people can get into the front. And then you realize that it's not accessible to people in wheelchairs or people pushing push chairs. And so you put a ramp on the side. It gets to the back of the shop. It's not access at the front. It's a little bit ugly. It's bolted in. It's an afterthought. But people have access. That is what we might consider to be accessible design. Whereas inclusive design would be if you add a ramp and the stairs to the front so everyone has equal access from the beginning. And of course, rails for support, and edges so people don't fall off the steps on the ramp, and markings so people who have difficulty distinguishing depth could get up and down the stairs easily. Now, I'm not going to get a trophy for beautiful shop design, certainly not my specialty, but you get the idea. And so, of course, inclusion is not exclusive to disabled people and people with impairments. When we talk about inclusivity in technology, we're usually talking about how to better include people from a variety of marginalized groups. It's those people who are not usually centered in technology, which means you can have accessibility without inclusivity, but it's short-term and it's a little bit superficial. We need inclusivity to make better technology. Because the thing is, most of the people who create most of today's technology create it to suit their own needs. And they're mostly white, and they're usually men, and they're relatively wealthy, and they're heterosexual, and cisgendered, and college-educated, and English-speaking, and able-bodied, which tends to define what they create. So on to the next pattern, CAPTCHA. And you're like, why are you talking about CAPTCHA, Laura? CAPTCHA is a challenge response test used in computing to determine whether or not the user is human. Now, you might not design CAPTCHA into what you're creating, but chances are it ends up being there, so it's important. It's an acronym for a completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. And it's used mostly to prevent bots from accessing websites, so they can't index the site or access its features repeatedly for free. So it looks a bit like this. Now, we used to have other types of CAPTCHA, but nowadays it's mostly likely to ask you, what's a pedestrian crossing in this photo? Can you select a traffic light? Can you identify a geographic feature? Because all of these things assist with mapping. And detecting whether you're human is not really about what you're doing here. It's mostly about the time delay and the movement in your interactions. According to SimilarTech, 4.25% of all sites use CAPTCHA. That's a huge amount. But the popularity of CAPTCHAs is a massive issue for people who use screen readers. And screen readers is a type of assistive technology which reads the content of the screen as audio or braille, Most of you probably have one on your smartphone or on your computer. You just may not have used it. And in 2017, WebAIM, the company I mentioned previously, did a survey of screen reader users, and they reported CAPTCHA as significantly the most problematic feature when trying to access the web. And now you bear in mind that CAPTCHA is usually used on registration and login. That is a huge number of people who suddenly can't get to your site at all. CAPTCHA dictates that proving you're not a robot requires a specific visual, spatial, linguistic, or mathematical skill as well. To the point where people with assistive technologies like screen readers often report they get classified as a bot. And so we understand why tech might choose to misguidedly use CAPTCHA, but why is it so prevalent? Like, over 2 million sites use reCAPTCHA, which is Google's free CAPTCHA service. What's in it for Google offering this service for free that catches all these bots? Why do they tell us that we need it? Right now, we're helping Google digitize books, recognize images, and stop self-driving cars from running red lights in the future. A woman in the US even sued Google, saying they were unfairly using her free labor. But CAPTCHA is actually evolving, and it's not in a good way. Google has introduced reCAPTCHA 3, which returns a score for each request without user friction. You know what that user friction is? People even knowing it's there. It operates invisibly on the site. So is that better for accessibility? I mean, maybe. But only if it doesn't continue to classify people using assistive technology as bots. The thing is, reCAPTCHA works best when it has the most context about interactions with your site, which comes from seeing both legitimate and abusive behavior. For this reason, we recommend including reCAPTCHA verification on forms or actions, as well as in the background of pages for analytics. Basically, what they are saying is, to work, reCAPTCHA needs to be deeply embedded within a site with access to all interaction conducted on the site. There's a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. And what is surveillance capitalism? Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. Although some of these data are applied to product or service improvement, the rest are fabricated into prediction products that will anticipate what you will do now, soon, and later. Surveillance capitalism is defined by surveilling our behavior and monetizing it. If it sounds familiar to you, well, that will be because it forms the dominant business model of technology today. Google's proprietary methods enable it to surveil, capture, expand, construct, and claim behavioral surplus, including data that users intentionally choose not to share. That's from that book. reCAPTCHA, operating silently in the background of a website, is the perfect surveillance tool. And so I know we're kind of starting to wade into very deep waters here, not the kinds of topics you'd always feel comfortable discussing with your coworkers or your boss or your clients. But it's okay, that's why I'm here. I'm here to hold all of your hands. So CAPTCHA is popular. It's pretty poor for inclusivity and accessibility, and the ethics are misjudged. So as we start to get into the features that are more tangled with our business models and our business goals, fixability becomes much trickier. If we're genuinely trying to prove a person is a human, privacy-respecting alternatives exist and are in the works. But we have to be willing to actually find these alternatives in the first place and not just use what everybody else is using. So CAPTCHA's overall rating would be a worried face from me. Next pattern, profiling. The process of construction and application of user profiles generated by computerized data analysis. It's a popular pattern. It props up the majority of today's big tech. So that'll be all these sites, among many others, that use the profiles they've gathered to target users with advertising and content, to maximize their profits. And as customers or consumers, you might say, I like seeing advertising that's relevant to me rather than irrelevant junk I don't care for. But are all the ads you see really relevant to you? Here's an example of me of Facebook, which I barely use for obvious reasons. I don't give it much information. My public profile is barely filled out. I don't really like or share anything, which means I get ads aimed at a stereotypical woman in her early 30s. They like to throw in a pregnancy test one every now and again. Give me a scare. And this is why Facebook will only let you sign up as male or female on the site. I mean, sure, you can specify a gender once you've signed up and all of that. It makes it easier to put you in a box. As Eva Blue de Monte wrote in The New Statesman, when profiling us, companies are not interested in our names or who we really are. They're interested in the patterns of our behavior that they believe match an audience type. So to target us more effectively, efficiently, the advertisement industry relies on a very binary vision of the world. And through this, advertising continues to perpetuate stereotypes and existing prejudices. We need to be clear that in a data-driven world where artificial intelligence makes decisions based on simplistic profiles about us, it isn't going to solve prejudices. It's going to perpetuate them. And this isn't just about ads that tell women they should be focused on domestic tasks and looking pretty and getting pregnant. Advertising continues to perpetuate stereotypes and existing prejudices. Like in 2016, ProPublica discovered about Facebook, the ubiquitous social network not only allows advertisers to target users by their interests or background, it also gives advertisers the ability to exclude specific groups it calls ethnic affinities. And even when Facebook removed the ability to target those groups with those specific type of ads, it still perpetuates inequality in its profiling. A study into who Facebook picked to show ads to showed that given a large group of people who might be eligible to see an advertisement, Facebook will pick among them based on its own profit-maximizing calculations, sometimes serving ads to audiences that are skewed heavily by race and gender. And here's an example. Facebook delivered ads for jobs in the lumber industry to an audience that was approximately 70% white and 90% men, and supermarket cashier positions to an audience of approximately 85% women. Home sale ads, meanwhile, were delivered to approximately 75% white users, while ads for rentals were shown to a more racially balanced group. So they concluded that an ad system that is designed to maximize clicks and to maximize profit for Facebook will naturally reinforce these social inequities and so serve as a barrier to equal opportunity. So we have to ask, when maximizing clicks to maximize profit reinforces social inequities, what does that mean for technology's dominant funding models? And web-based tracking is just the beginning. So trackers are becoming way more ubiquitous. We have Google Nest, we have the smart speakers, all having a good listen and a look around your home. Hello Barbie, your kids can talk to her, and all that information is recorded and sent to a multinational corporation. Smart pacifier, put a chip in your baby. A Loon cup, a smart menstrual cup. And that is the first of many things that they want women to put inside themselves, including the smart dildo. WeConnect, the smart dildo makers, were actually sued for tracking their users' habits. And companies, many of them get away with tracking like this because they just hide it away in the terms and conditions. And have you ever wondered how many calories you're burning during intercourse? How many thrusts? The speed of your thrusts? The duration of your sessions and their frequency? How many different positions you use in the period of a week, a month, or a year will you want the eye condom? And have you ever wanted to share all of that information with advertisers, insurers, your government, and who knows else? So I'm not saying you shouldn't use any of these products as a concept, but the cost of using those products should not be our personal data, our privacy, our power, our agency, our control. Privacy is not about hiding. It's about having power and agency over how your information is used. And this is an inclusivity issue. We have to pay greater attention to who benefits and who loses out when targeting is involved. Because one person's relevant advertising is another person's grounds for discrimination. So again, this isn't an exaggeration. This is going to be really tiny, weeny text here, but health insurance is a major customer for data obtained through profiling. And Cracked Labs did a report looking at profile information that data brokers who suck up data from all these different organizations have. And if you look very closely under health interests, they reckon they can detect if you're disabled, or they know that you're disabled. And potential employers could use this information to exclude people with disabilities from targeted job ads. So next time we say that privacy is a low cost for convenience, we must remember the people whose data will be used against them. And so profiling is immensely popular. It massively and negatively impacts inclusivity and accessibility. And the ethics are something we truly need to be concerned about. And here's the kicker, unlike some other patterns, it's just not easy to fix. Because big tech won't be reformed. It doesn't want to be reformed. It sees no problem with what it's doing. It just thinks it has a public relations problem. These guys, 6 of the 12 richest people in the world. Their platforms are bigger than whole countries. They have more lobbying power and influence than anybody else in the world. They don't have a problem. This means we can't reform the massive corporations we're working for from the inside. People may have the best will in the world to do so, but we have to find our power elsewhere. This is what happens to people who try to change big tech from the inside. They get fired, or they can't be fired, so they get demoted and lose responsibility. They lose the little power they already have just for trying to organize a walkout or trying to organize a union. And we need new models, not just new role models, but new funding models, new ways to fund technology where access to technology and civil rights are not pitted against each other. And as designers, we need to question the success criteria for our design work. Are we facilitating growth at other people's expense? Why are we adding the features that we're adding? Who benefits from them and who loses? And we can make sites more usable and less hostile to the people using them. We can make sites inclusive and more accessible. But if we're doing all of that with a bad business model, all we're doing is leading more people into exploitation. As Sarah CAPTCHA says in her brilliant book, Technically Wrong, I believe that making interfaces easier to use is vital work. But when designers use clean aesthetics to cover over a complex reality, to take something human, nuanced, and rife with potential for bias, and flatten it behind a seamless interface, they're not really making it easier for you. They're just hiding the flaws in their model and hoping you won't ask too many difficult questions. So it's hard to put a rating on this one. I think maybe it's just a face with a zip mouth. And many of these patterns have become industry standards. We don't question their use like we should, because everybody else uses them. And I speak at events like this because I know that you are the kind of people that can make change. I've been speaking about issues like this for around 7 years now, and while I've seen awareness increase, change has been too slow. We've got to be comfortable being different. Be the person who creates alternatives. Be a better designer. Find ways to create and fund these useful and fun experiences for people without losing power and agency over their own data. Be the advisor. Do the research on inclusive and ethical technology. Make recommendations to others. Make it harder for them to make excuses. Be the advocate. Marginalized people should not have to risk themselves to make change. Advocate for others. Advocate for the underrepresented. Question the norms. Try asking a business, how do you make your money? Come ask me that later. Come ask me, how do I make money? Ask, why are we building things in this way? Be the gatekeeper. When the advocacy isn't getting you far enough, use your expertise to prevent unethical design from happening on your watch. Be difficult. Be the person who is known for always bringing up the issue. Embrace the awkwardness that comes with your power. Call out the questionable behaviour. Be unprofessional. Don't let anybody tell you that standing up for the needs of yourself and for others is unprofessional. Don't let people tell you to be quiet or that you need to smile more or that you'll get things done if you're a bit nicer. Be the supporter. If you're not comfortable speaking up for yourself, at least be there for those who do. Remember that silence is complicity. Nothing is inevitable. Big tech will tell us that this is the only way to build technology. It isn't. So go forth, have lunch, and disrupt the disruptors. Thank you.